I'd like to bring the meeting of March 18th to order and ask if anybody besides LCAT is recording this meeting.
Bruce Finney for the minutes.
Okay. Moving forward, I'd like to review and approve the minutes of the meetings of February 23rd,
So move.
March.
Are you gonna do it all together?
Hold there.
You gonna do it together, all together? or
No,
you
because
gonna-
I wasn't at it.
Yeah, so let's do that one individually,
23rd.
cause,
Okay. All in favor?
well, I'll second it.
Second it.
And, aye,
Aye.
okay, now the other two.
And then review and approve the minutes of March 3rd, 2015, and the executive session of March 3rd, March 3rd, 2015.
So move.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, at this point, then we'll move on over to the superintendent's report.
Thank you. I'd like to go through my typical monthly budget update, and really just note that the trends that you see in this summary sheet are very similar to what we've seen in the past. That in all the divisions, with the exception of the waste division, which I'll talk about, and snow and ice, which I'll talk about, we are tracking well compared to last year and well compared to budget. I will note on snow and ice that number is a good number, in that as of the 3rd of March, we were below last year's expenditures for snow and ice. I expect we'll probably finish this year fairly close to last year. There's a significant amount of bills, particularly relative to salt costs, that are going to catch up to us and will drive that number quite a bit higher than it is now. Last year, I believe we finished the year in the range of $470,000 total for snow and ice, and I would expect us to ultimately be fairly close to that this year. But again, given that the salt prices have increased 40%, I think even to finish this year close to last year is a pretty good achievement.
That's like a winner.
Our waste budget, as we've talked about multiple times, is one that we've struggled with on the expense portion of it. The good news is we've had discussions with Appropriations Committee, and they are amenable to us submitting a request to basically allocate the revenue that we'll be realizing off the metal recycling to the budget. So that will help to bring us back certainly much closer to budget. And we'll continue to finish the year as we typically have, looking at how other divisions benefit from the transfer station and apportioning costs to other divisions and related to that to get through the year. So again, trends are very similar, and I think all very good. Even, I'll note, with all the water issues that we've had over this winter, we're doing pretty well in the water labor budget. We're right about on budget right now, so all the overtime that we've incurred relative to water breaks is reflected in the numbers that you see here. I'll talk about water main breaks, and I'm not certain if Mr. Collins was planning to speak to them as well, but we've had over the past month 2, 3, 4, 5 breaks, although all the breaks have been relatively minor in nature. They typically have been water services or hydrant leads that have had problems. In several cases, it's been the hydrant, the water services that have pulled away from the main, likely because the frost depths are now getting down to a point where maybe the gooseneck or the shallow pieces of the water services are being now disrupted by the frost, and that's causing them to move and pulling them away from the mains. We have only had one main break, I believe, the one at Chestnut.
That's correct.
We have had no water service freeze-ups at all, compared to some communities that have had several hundred water service freeze-ups. So we're optimistic the worst is behind us. And the types of problems that we see are typically relatively minor in nature, but they're complicated by the weather conditions. Even the service issues are not difficult issues to deal with, but they become difficult when you've got 3 feet of frost to dig through to find the service and ultimately repair the service. Noting for the record the monies that we've talked about, the final reimbursement relative to the October 11th storm, of 2011 storm. We have received approval from Mass DOT of just over $160,000. They have to get the Federal Highway Administration approval now for that same amount. Everything looks to be going very well. So we're optimistic within the next couple of months, we'll be getting approval for the final reimbursement of those monies, which I believe will bring reimbursement for that total work to almost $1 million that have been reimbursed back to the town.
That's great.
Road restoration projects, we've talked about them at the last meeting. I just wanted to note that we are gearing up to put our first project out to bid by the middle of April. And as we talked about previously, that's primarily focusing on the main roads at this point. We've allocated about 3/4 of our current funding to the main roads, which gives us some ability to then focus on the side streets as well, once we deal with some of the major issues in the main roads. You'll notice probably within the next week or so that there'll be some activity on several of our main streets, because we are going to be doing pavement cores. So those areas have been marked out right now, and you'll see a coring unit from Which Equipment will be out on site probably early next week, drilling cores to verify the pavement depths and the gravel depths, particularly on a couple of streets like Porter, I believe, and Westwood, and possibly on Prospect as well, I believe, are some of the streets that we've targeted. We are hearing some good news from the state in that Governor Baker is looking to push the fiscal 16 Chapter 90 money out early this year. He's filed a bill at this point to put out the first $200 million of fiscal 16 monies. That was filed last week. Typically that doesn't come out for another 6 months or so, so we may in fact have, in addition to the monies that we have currently in hand, we may be receiving our typical allocation, which is $500,000 to $600,000, significantly early this year.
So we could put that out to bid relatively soon.
We would, our goal would be to get it out to bid this, identify the additional areas that we need to
Right.
work on and try to get that done this year. Get our roads in good shape.
We have to wait till July 1 to actually spend it, or it'll actually allow us to go?
We will have to wait to July 1 because we need town meeting appropriation. Even though it's state money, town meeting still has to vote to allocate those monies to be reimbursed by the state. So
Got it.
once we get past the current allocation, yes, we'll have to wait until the town meeting vote is official.
So we could put it out to bid and just be ready to go.
Correct, yeah. What else did I want to note? That I'm working with Ryan Quimby, as you saw, relative to a note on potentially identifying a small fiber optic project to be done in town. That would be bringing fiber optic cabling a short distance south on Shaker Road to serve with a private cable entity, or private fiber optic entity, excuse me, serving a private business on Shaker Road. And it would be similar to the work that town has done before, where the fiber optic company is covering all of our costs. We would provide the labor. We would then have shared ownership of the conduit and the fiber optic cabling that's installed. Potentially with some revenue to be realized also, because they would be looking to tie into our connection at Town Hall and to make that connection available to them. Town Hall connects into the state's fiber network, and they want to get access to the state's fiber optic network. And we would be the means by which they would get that access.
So probably 8 years ago, that was potentially a plan when we started this. I don't know.
Right.
I don't know if my timing is perfect, but when we started doing this, part of the 96, pairs, the size of the
Right.
fibers we were running was we'd have plenty for us, and then the potential could exist for actually a revenue stream. So we may want to actually kind of check into that whole thing. It was talked about to be like water and sewer billing,
Right.
where we would actually get that started, it'd be a utility, we would have a way to bill it, and that should be in minutes and was definitely talked about.
Right.
So this is pretty cool if it actually expands. It'll bring back some of our costs to get to all of our
Right.
facilities.
Ryan's optimistic by partnering with this company that will open up some other opportunities across the town. So
Right.
it's the first step towards what you had envisioned a number of years ago.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
Isn't there money coming in now from the
There's
one
a-
that went from State Street to Enfield?
That was part of the whole, that was part of the
That's-
original
That's
deal.
what got it going.
Right,
Then
but
we
this is
seen-
now connections
Right.
to individuals. It'd be like a water bill, like a sewer bill,
Right.
monthly bill.
Yep.
Well, isn't the town getting revenue from that at all?
It's been so long that I don't
Yeah.
exactly remember whether they bought the pipe and stuff like that. I think the revenue we got, we probably already expended. I don't know that it was a reoccurring invoice. I'm not sure of an invoice we're sending monthly anywhere.
Certainly, there's nothing that DPW is involved with
Yeah.
that.
I think what it was is they bought the boxes, they bought the pipes, they bought the wire, the fiber,
Everything.
and we just kept calling saying, send more fiber, send more wire. And that was we actually went out to bid to make it, the procurement actually work. We were looking for somebody to work with us, and then we got somebody who bought all the pipe and bought all I think we might have to buy some of it because it was very private to us.
I think that, I know you were negotiating with them at the time, that they actually provided the additional conduit as well. The
Okay.
one that we use and an empty conduit.
Oh, correct.
Throughout the course of this whole 10, I think it's 10 miles
Right,
underground.
yeah, yeah.
And it's paired up
Yeah.
the whole way, so.
So we can actually pull more fiber. If this grows and the resources from this utility actually start to provide a surplus, we would then have funding to upgrade to more pairs and continue to sell it. That was the idea, and it runs right down some key areas behind retail, commercial businesses that, once the pairs on the poles that the other providers have are done, we've got an entity there. And ours is safer, if you will, because it's underground.
Right.
Everybody else is on a wire, so on a windy day like yesterday, if the poles went down, they lost their fiber connection. Ours is, the majority is underground. So, very cool.
One of the secondary benefits, and actually Mr. Collins and I haven't talked about this yet, is that the route that we're looking at may potentially come across Shaker Road, about the location that we're talking about doing a sidewalk relocation project, and then go up along the rotary where we're talking about doing some improvements to the road edges. We've talked about doing some pavers or cobbles or things like that, so we may be able to combine fiber installation up along with some of the other improvements that we're planning to make.
Very cool.
Two other quick things I'm going to mention, and then I want to spend some time talking about water and sewer rates. The goal is to get the board up to speed of where I see water and sewer rates likely going this year, and then to schedule a rate hearing that would be likely within the next couple of weeks to go through the formal public hearing process on the rates. But the two other items I did want to mention, actually three items. A reminder to two of the members, April 10th is still the deadline for the state ethics certification that needs to be submitted. We have submitted all the other town departments' certifications for all the rest of the employees at this point, so the last two really can be done independently. I wanted to note that we have a meeting tomorrow that's probably going to take most of the day with a gentleman from Mass DEP doing what is referred to as a sanitary survey. Every 5 years, the state is required to survey every water system in the state, every public water system in the state. So a gentleman will be coming in, he'll spend hours talking with us, visiting our facilities, checking our operating procedures, things like that. So that'll be happening starting at 8 tomorrow morning and probably taking a good part of the day. And the last item I did want to note was that the Board of Selectmen has approved the enterprise fund policy, cost allocation policy that we've been talking about for some time. And I do have copies of the signed document signed by the Board of Selectmen that I can distribute for signature by the Board of Public Works. We have approved that in the past, so I don't think there's a need to reapprove it. But it's strictly putting the board signatures on those documents so we can retain one copy and the Board of Selectmen retain the other copy. So we can distribute those after the meeting. So I guess the biggest item I wanted to talk about today was water and sewer rates. And what I put together in your package is something pretty similar to what you saw last year. And I'll review sort of what this process is again, is that I basically take the water and sewer budgets, operating budgets and capital budgets. I assemble them in a spreadsheet For planning purposes, I make some assumptions of how those budgets might change going out the next 4 to 5 years, so we can take a look at how rates might change out the next 4 or 5 years, really just as a planning tool. I have the ability to assign different escalation rates to different costs. You know, fuel costs might increase fast as labor costs or other types of things. So I have the ability to kind of work with those numbers to come up with, again, what projections might look like going out the next 4 or 5 years. When I did this last year, we knew that the water and sewer enterprise funds were most likely going to be adopted at town meeting, so the model that I put together did include the water and sewer enterprise funds and what impact that might have on rates going forward. There are just a couple of new lines that were added this year that weren't on the spreadsheet last year. We recently added a line to cover the cost of vehicle insurance. We've gone through the process of allocating about 20% of the town's fleet to the water enterprise fund and to the sewer enterprise fund, and we've gone through the process of allocating costs to repair that fleet, to fuel that fleet, and ultimately to insure that fleet, and have built that all into the department's budget. So if you compared the spreadsheet to what I had presented last year, I believe that's the only new line item that you would see. It's about halfway down the spreadsheet is something called vehicle insurance. The numbers have changed a bit from last year, not dramatically. As we made it through the enterprise fund process this year, we did see that some of the employee benefit costs were greater than had been estimated last year, so that line item did go up. But in general, we're about where I had estimated we might be last year. The other item that's new in the spreadsheet that wasn't on last year's spreadsheet is that for both the water and sewer enterprise funds, we recognized that if the water and sewer enterprise funds are going to be responsible for vehicles, they're also going to be responsible for replacing vehicles at some point in the future. So what I've done is I've created a line where every year we would allocate a portion of the department's budgets to vehicle replacement, not to necessarily replace a vehicle during that year, but to put those monies aside so that vehicles could be replaced when needed. We did go through the process recently to take a look at that fleet and what the replacement cost of the water and sewer fleet would be in total, and it's in the range of about $650,000, $700,000 if we were to replace everything new today. Obviously, we're not going to replace everything new today, but that.
Right.
So I took a look at what type of capital would we need to set aside on an annual basis to say maybe over a 5 to 10 year basis replace the entire fleet. You know, some pieces need to be replaced very quickly. Some of them we might get another 10 years out of before they need to be replaced. So that's really where I came up with the number that I used both in the water and the sewer enterprise funds of $35,000 of an initial investment that over 10 years at current value would generate about $700,000 that could be used as needed over those 10 years to be put towards vehicle replacement. You know, that number may still be a little bit low, but it gets us.
It's very low, because, I mean, $35,000, I mean, that's a pickup truck.
Right, but over 10 years, that generates,
Oh, for
And there's
fund,
There's two of them too, there's water and
Correct.
sewer,
Right.
35.
right. But he said $600,000 would be the replacement value.
Right, so
For the
35
tool.
plus 35 is 70,
Right.
times 10 is 700.
But we're gonna need that before the, I think
Right.
initially we're gonna have some problems trying to replace some.
what it does in each one of the funds.
I mean, what happens if we have to replace, a loader,
Right.
a backhoe?
That's partly why we maintain a balance in the bank, essentially, a balance in the water and sewer funds that allow us, if we have a capital cost that we don't want to bond, for instance, that we don't want to spend over multiple years. So for instance, if we jump ahead, you'll see at the bottom line of one of the rate scenarios, that $35,000 by fiscal 2020 builds to $193,000. Both by escalating, I think I escalated that $35,000 at 5% every year. And then it compounds itself because you're putting those monies away. You know, if we have to buy something sooner than 5 years, we may be able to fund all of it out of monies that have been put away, or we may fund some of it through our bank account and then replenish that bank account through the set-aside over the following years.
With the line right above it, that's where you can decide where you're gonna take it from.
The ending balance.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So the number can still be fine-tuned, but we recognize that if we're going to own these vehicles and we have to maintain them and fund them, we now need to provide a means for funding and then put those monies aside to do so. So as I said, and I was took a look at where we thought rates might. Well, one thing I did want to say is that the big uncertainty in all of this is the Springfield Water and Sewer Commission costs. In particular, on the water side of the business, they last year had estimated that their costs were going to be going up between 40% and 60% over the next 5 years. We're fortunate that this year, what they had told us last year the increase it did not happen. They were actually able to keep their budget flat for this year. So what we've allocated in our budget for Springfield Water and Sewer Commission costs this year for the drinking water portion is exactly the same as last year. They've told us largely it means that their cash needs are going to be deferred another year or so because of financing means and things like that. But I've asked them for an updated projection of what the next 5 years look like, and they haven't been able to provide that to me yet. So until I get that, all I did was take what they gave us last year and push it forward 5 years, or push it forward a year. If their projections appear to be overly conservative, which they certainly were for this year, things will look better than what you see here. The other thing that I want to note is that, particularly on the water side of the fund, we are planning some fairly significant capital improvement projects to continue over the next 5 years. Most of them are built into this budget by funding them through that year's revenue, not by bonding them. So, for instance, in fiscal 2017, right now our capital improvement plan shows a $513,000 water main replacement project. I have not attempted to spread that over 5 years or 10 years. I've assumed that all of that project is going to be funded through current year revenue. Obviously, if it's spread out over multiple years, the impact over that year will come down dramatically. So, as we look at what we want to do with rates, not this year necessarily, but in future years, we may want to take a look at spreading some of these projects out and/or, bonding them over multiple years to reduce the impact to the ratepayers. What it means for this year, and I really would pay primarily attention to this year because the next 4 years there's a lot of uncertainty out there right now, is that we would continue to need to increase rates this year. Actually, not quite as much as I thought we might have to when we had this discussion last year. I took a look at the spreadsheets I put together last year, and we're not quite as high as I had thought at that point. Part of that is because our revenue projections were fairly conservative in terms of how much water we would sell and how much wastewater we would charge for. And we're brought in a little bit more revenue than we expected, so that what it does is reduce the impact to the ratepayers. It's a crapshoot year to year. So as I talked about last year, what I did was I looked at what we had consumed for water over the past 10 years, and I didn't pick the lowest year, but I picked one of the lowest years as an assumption, because we want to make certain generally that we bring in enough revenue to support the business. I don't want to pick our greatest revenue occurs during the years that we sell the most water. We don't want to base a budget on that year.
No.
We don't necessarily want to base it on the year that we sold the least amount of water necessarily, but we do want to be fairly conservative and base it on the lower range, just so we don't end up short.
Makes sense.
So we talked about with the enterprise funds of the shifting of primarily employee costs from the general fund to the enterprise fund. That alone was going to result in about 15 cents per 100 cubic feet impact to the rates. And then when you include some of the other factors in there, we're looking most likely at having to increase rates more than that.
Now, when we go to town meeting in May, this will all be taken out of our general budget, and we'll be voting on this at town meeting separately.
Right, there will be, as I understand it, a separate water enterprise fund article and a separate sewer enterprise fund article. And a couple of meetings ago, I presented sort of a prototype of what that article would look like. It would basically be voting on expected revenue, or expected expenses, expected revenue, and whether we would be adding to the balance in the fund or reducing the balance of the fund. And, you know, the way that things look this year, we would continue to reduce the balance of the water and sewer funds. And that's one way you keep your rates down a little bit, is by letting the bank account get a little bit smaller. But we can't do that forever, or there won't be any money left in the bank. So it's, you know, it's those decisions that we have to make on a year-by-year basis.
Do we know if assuming that it's passed, the article is passed to approve the water and sewer enterprise fund, and the budget is going to reflect just a number, or how, are they gonna, is the town people gonna vote on this whole sheet, or are they just gonna, or is it gonna be, are they approving a number, or no, there's no number, because there's no appropriation?
What they'll do, and I'll have the sheet ready for the public hearing, I didn't have it ready for tonight, it'll look very similar to what you saw a month or two ago with updated numbers. It'll be a balance sheet for the water enterprise fund. It will be probably 6 numbers.
Okay.
It'll be anticipated revenue and a breakdown of that anticipated revenue, anticipated expenditures as we present them now. For instance, you know, we always present payroll costs and expenses. There'll be a breakdown of payroll and expenses. There won't be, the information that the voters will be asked to approve will be very similar to what they've been asked to approve before, but it was always presented as part of the town's overall budget.
Right.
Now it'll be presented as a separate breakdown, but a very similar breakdown to what they've seen in the past.
Okay.
The benefit of this spreadsheet is really just for planning purposes. If we want to look beyond this upcoming year and maybe decide we increase rates a little bit more or don't increase them as much, depending on what we expect might have to happen in the future, it allows us to look forward a little bit. So as I said, we're not looking to approve rates tonight, but really get the information out in front of you. I'll continue to fine tune these numbers a little bit. I don't expect they're going to change in any significant amount. So by our next meeting, I'd be at a point where I'd be ready to recommend a rate for fiscal 16.
If I did this right, just so I'm thinking about it right, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. If I take water, we're talking 20 cents, 40 cents, nothing, 5 cents, 5 cents. And then in sewer, it's 30, 20, negative 10, 10 cents, and then negative 10.
Right.
Aggregate them on 50, 60, negative 10, up 15, down 5. Did we not get potentially the projected rate increase for 18, 19, 20 high enough? And we need to be aware of that, or can we shift some of that 513,000 in 17, so we're not going up 50, up 60, then down 10? I'm just from a taxpayer's
Sure.
budgeting and pocket,
Right.
and how much can I absorb in the
Right.
cost of living?
Right, certainly, every capital project that we have, we can make a decision how we pay for that, whether we pay for it out of 1 year, out of 5 years, out of 10 years. So, and those types of decisions you really want to make year by year. The other thing that we have no idea of is what revenue we will actually bring in over the year. You know, for
Right.
instance, this spring, and that number can vary our revenue by 20% a year.
Is that what's moving this around a lot if I study it heavily? Let's see.
Yeah. The revenue assumptions, what we sell is constant. I
Okay.
assumed what I feel is a conservative volume that we sell every year.
Right.
And then the rate gets applied to that volume.
So what made the big variable, like in the water? No, in the sewer. We need 20 cents, then we need 40 cents, and then we don't need anything.
In the sewer, one of the big variables in year one, say 16 to 17, is that we're drawing the bank account down a couple $100,000 from 16 to 17. And then we're maintaining a constant bank account for the rest of the time.
Come, I don't see that.
Oh,
518 goes
yeah,
to 300.
correct. So that helps to hold down fiscal 16 rates.
But there's still 20 cents, right, to survive at that number.
Still 20 cents.
We're going from 255 to 275
Correct.
to
correct.
hold that number.
That's correct.
And we drew it down 518 to 300.
Right.
Okay. Then the next year, we don't have that 200 to work with. So it's gonna go up 40 cents because we didn't have that to work with.
Right.
The next year, I don't see the big difference in the two columns. I'm blind to it for some reason.
Between which two columns now, 17 and
Between
18?
17 and 18. I'm missing something.
Um,
And we don't need to debate it here. I'm just
Sure.
missing something that,
Yeah, looking at this, the differences between the columns are the expenses increase a bit. You know, the expenses, I'm estimating, just for planning purposes, may increase $15,000, $20,000 that year.
right,
The revenue, because the rate for this exercise I'm showing is the same, the revenue
Right.
stays the same.
right.
All the other revenue components stay the same. So the total revenue stays the same.
Oh, all right. So I see 16 to 17, the revenue went up 260,000.
Right.
And we based that on,
We base that on the increased rate from the 255 up to the 275. That 20-cent difference brought in more revenue.
all right, so now we're gonna go 40 cents. But the 1991 didn't go up
Which,
on sewer.
what are you seeing, 40 cents?
I'm seeing we're going 275 to 315.
It's 40 cents, right?
That 40 cents,
Is showing up, that's the 260? All right, and then 315 stays the same, that's why 1991 stays the same? I'm 1 year off in what I'm
Right.
thinking. All right,
Yeah,
I got
yeah.
it, I got it.
yeah, the revenue you bring in,
So total revenue, the assumption in 15 is more like 1.6 something. I just don't see
Correct.
that column. All right, I get it, I got it. Got it. I just wanted to understand
Sure.
it so I could, I got it.
right, okay.
Can I just
Yes, sir.
say hello?
Yes, sir.
Hey, I just want to thank John Collins and the DPW workers. We had an incident down at the Stop and Shop Plaza, a suspicious object. Phone calls were made, John and the crews got out there, barricaded the street. We shut down North Main Street from Harkness, which isn't an easy feat.
Mm.
But I happen to see you folks here and I just want to thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You know, so there, as we look at this, there's variables.
Got it.
Again, as I said.
Got it. Okay, I get it.
And there's decisions, you know, we can make in the future. What projects do we do? How do we fund those projects?
So that 17 of 513, we'll just have to be looking at it pretty good. The question that we might have right now is, do we want to try and get anything bonded while bond rates are low this year? We definitely want to look at it next year, in my opinion,
Right,
and spread that 513 over so that we don't go so high here and then, you know, be unnecessarily affecting budgets, you know, and big ups and downs, you know what I'm saying?
and the big decision would make is whether we accelerate the North Main, the Maple Street water main project, because that's the biggest capital item that we have right there to take advantage of the advantageous bond rates.
Right? They've
You-
never been lower.
Right.
This is insane.
Yeah. The challenge you have, and not to say, because we certainly could do it, and you're probably familiar with the term arbitrage. Municipalities aren't allowed to borrow money and put it in the bank.
I understand.
They have to borrow it and they have to
And
spend
spend
it
it.
within a certain period of time.
Right.
And it's typically an 18-month window that they're looking at, or else you have to do short-term bank authorization notes and things like that until you're ready to bond the entire project.
Want to do it legally.
So-
I get it.
But moving something forward because the rates are attractive, absolutely, and then making certain we get it done within the allowed upon time.
Awesome.
So it takes a little bit to digest this. I think the approach is pretty solid. Again, it allows us to take a look at, do we do things like you mentioned, move some of these things forward, and then spread them out over, are we looking at financing a project? If it's a $2 million project, maybe it's a 20-year note versus a 10-year note. But unfortunately, we are looking at rates increasing. We knew that was going to happen, even if it had not been the enterprise funds, but as a result of some of the cost reallocation, that drives the need to further increase rates. And I think with that, sorry.
The only other exercise I used to make Dave or Silvio attempt to go through is 20 cents on the water and 30 cents, or 20 cents on the sewer and 30 cents on the water. There's a kind of a percentage of how much water and how much sewer, because some of it goes out to lawn sprinklers.
Mm.
If that can be incorporated so we get a little feel for, it's not gonna be 50, if we go up 20 and 30, it's not gonna be 50 cents for every water gallon for everybody.
Right.
Just to get a feel for it.
The other thing that further complicates is that we sell some of our water at an ag rate.
Right.
So it's essentially, for that gallon, we get 75% of the value of that gallon.
So don't go crazy on it, but the more we can know when we set a rate,
So
or
you're-
if we're gonna get asked in public, how does that happen?
Should we go up more on the water rate this year to sort of cut back that big gap there?
We could, and I think I'm optimistic. Actually, the other thing I forgot to mention is that Springfield Water and Sewer Commission has set up a meeting for March 30th to sit down. We're at the end of our 5-year or 7-year sewer contract. So they're meeting with all the communities to talk about what they see that looking like, and I'm hopeful they're going to give us some more information regarding water projections at that meeting. If so, by the time we meet the next time, I should have up-to-date numbers, and if they are what I've presented now, yeah, I think your suggestion makes some sense, because it's a big jump to do in 1 year.
Yeah.
Did you say March 30th or May 30th?
March 30th. Yeah.
March 30th.
So it's in just
So it's in
soon, yeah.
More than
Couple
30
weeks.
cents?
Hmm?
Go more than 30 cents?
No, look at 17.
It's 20 cents, isn't it? Did I do something wrong? Oh, my goodness.
Yeah.
I went backwards. How silly is that?
It's a big number.
Huge.
Right,
That's bad math, huh?
that's what I was trying to follow.
Yeah, I missed. I see it, I got it.
Okay.
I have bad math.
So if we come up a little bit this year, we'll have some money in the bank, and that 500 won't look so hard.
Until this winter, I would have told you that I thought that our water sales were going to be similar this fiscal year as last year, because calendar year to calendar year, they track
Right.
within a couple of percentage points of the same. Depending on how wet of a spring we have, we could see sales drop if this year extends out into April and May, and we
Yeah,
don't
but
see
when-
sprinklers coming
When
on.
right now, we're tracking at about 75 inches of snow, and that's about what we had last year.
Yep,
You
it's
know,
just all
so-
still on the ground.
It's-
Right, it's still,
Yeah.
It's
All right.
we were striping fields at this time of year 2 years ago,
right,
so it's, yeah.
not this year.
So some things to ponder, and as you look at these, if you have any questions, if you want to sit there, the nice thing about the spreadsheets is I can manipulate them in any way to try different scenarios. And with that, I think I'm done.
And we're gonna set the meeting date for the hearing for
The 6th of
April
April.
6th.
Yeah.
That's correct. And that'll be publicized, there'll be a public, notice going out in the Springfield Republican, as well as the normal posting methods.
Okay.
At that point, then, we'll be looking forward to operations manager's report.
Gentlemen,
Got it.
I'd like to, I know that most folks know that I was out of work for an extended period of time. I'd like to congratulate the department on a great job while I was gone. I know Bruce, I know a lot of people stepped up and did more than their fair share. And having come back in and see everything's running smoothly, everything's going well, and I think that's awesome. We talked.
Well, it's good to have you back, John.
Thank you. Mr. Parent touched on a number of things, the water breaks, and because of the frost, the water in several of these areas, Maple Street, Fisher Ave. It actually followed the sewer trench, undermined the road, instead of just popping up naturally at the weakest point. It actually looked for the weakest point, and we've had to cut out large areas of Maple Street. You can see the big patch. It was actually just a water service and would have been much smaller in normal conditions. And the same thing on Fisher. We've spent the better part of this week and last week doing Maple Street, cutting those out, filling them in with gravel. I don't know if we've got 100% of Maple Street. We were up against it there. We with the area, the traffic, we did to the extent we couldn't see anymore. It does look like it's sunk in a little bit at the far end of where we had gone. So they have been more difficult than the typical water breaks, and like Mr. Perrin said, they aren't water main breaks in most cases, but they've caused enough damage. The other thing is, you just touched on, is that the winter has really dragged on. The cold weather has kept the snow. In the past, at this point, we were marking fields. Normally, we're looming and seeding, plow damage, things like that, and those are all things that are going to have to be done, and it's going to be like all of a sudden quick. The snow's going to melt. They're going to be getting ready to play everything. So it's not going to give us the opportunity that we normally do to go in and, say, renovate a baseball field. So it's going to go from 100 miles an hour to 100 miles an hour. The blacktop plants are opening now. The guys have done a great job filling the potholes. The frost heaves. The roads are really took a beating this year, more so than I've seen in a long time. And again, they've done a nice job keeping up with it to the best of their ability with the material that we have available to us. We are sending the sweeper out. We had it fired up today, getting ready so that we could send it out tomorrow, sweep up the coal patch that's broken along the edge of the road, the stuff that we've been filling these potholes with. Again, the mailbox damage is down. I know last year you folks came up with a set policy. Mr. Parent sent it out, I believe, in the reminder on our webpage and all that.
It's on our webpage, but we had it as part of an article that was published in the reminder. Yeah.
I know that several people that I'm aware of have repaired their own mailboxes. Clearly, it wasn't our responsibility, and I see that as being way down from previous years, especially with the amount of snow we have. And
we had a tough February.
You know, and with the cold weather, it didn't melt down, so it's more on top of the existing snow. So that's really all I have right now, except that it is good to be back, and I think that the department has done an outstanding job.
Awesome. Good to have you.
Thank you.
And on the mailbox issue, I'll say that the administrative staff has done a good job. When the calls come in, what they've been doing basically is responding that, we will go out and we'll assess the mailbox, determine whether or not it's a department issue or not. So we've changed from, we'll go ahead and fix everything at the town's cost to, we'll take a look at it, and if it's our problem, we'll fix it, but if it's not, you'll have to fix your own problem.
And a noticeable difference for the positive.
Yep.
That's great.
I don't know if this,
The snowbanks haven't melted yet.
yeah. I think some of the mailboxes got frozen in nicely, so they didn't break off because they were frozen in.
Yeah.
But so on a field recreation question, do you think we could be proactive, contact Colin, work together and create some way that we could explain, obviously we're backed up, and do a coordinated effort with volunteers of the different disciplines of sports? And I say that because typically we would want to get out there, do as much as we can, and I know they always have volunteers that do a little of this and that. But if we were proactive, explained it's going to be really difficult without some additional help, and had a couple of coordinated meetings with the discipline coaches and managers, etc., and instead of them going and doing something and you were going to do it tomorrow, or you doing something and they were going to do it tomorrow,
Certainly.
or whatever, and you're just, oh, geez, we were going to do that, but then the DPW went and did that. I'm just wondering if a nice coordinated right now meeting,
Yep.
a couple of them even, and maybe there's volunteers and maybe there isn't, but it would be better than having other people not knowing who's gonna get where, when, and people are, they go out there and do something, you go, oh, geez, but now we gotta go over that and do this, and just a thought.
I'll
Because it's a abnormal, difficult spring start, and we could use coordinated efforts if it can be done, so.
We've had a couple of related discussions with Colin over the one as recently as, I guess, last week of
Yes.
how can we try to help the fields cleared faster? What other communities have done, some other communities have come and spread tarps in the field. And by putting a dark tarp in the field, you trap the heat beneath the tarp, you attract the rays of the sun. Some communities have some pretty good success doing that, so I won't steal your thunder.
No, that's good. We did. We brought one tarp out
Good.
to test that out. And I think that may be something Collins gonna wanna put together for a future.
My whole thought would be, and make sure it gets communicated so that some managers or coaches who don't know what we're doing don't go out there and, what's this tarp doing there? Who put this here? And they rip it off, and tomorrow you go there and the tarp's gone. One person thinks we're doing the right thing, the other person thinks they're doing the right thing, but we're both crossing up on each other, so.
Given how pinched we're gonna be.
It's
because
gonna be tight.
Yeah, we need as much coordination as we can get, yeah.
Yes, sir.
Could be, maybe even some of the exercise that the kids at the schools get is helping to pull them on, help put the tarps on, or help do something, or rake, or I don't know.
They have volunteers. There's a resource there.
Yeah, so, that's all.
Yeah, good idea.
Put them to work. Mr. Feeney?
Yes. Update on vehicle maintenance. We have completed over 17 preventative maintenance services on our vehicles. We're about halfway there. All those services will be completed by June, and then we'll be getting into the inspection sticker phase. We do have a couple of trucks that'll be required inspection before that. On another note, we have formulated a kind of a vehicle status sheet, which I share with Mr. Collins for day-to-day operations, Mr. Parent, and the garage foreman. This is kind of real-time data as we take vehicles on and offline through Google Sheets. And this is just a brief example the board can look at. You can just click on this sheet, take a vehicle offline, put the description of the repair that is needed, and then once those edits are made, they automatically email the administrative staff on what the vehicle status is, why it's offline, when the vehicle will be online. It helps Mr. Collins with planning his daily scheduled events for that day, and just kind of keeps everybody in the loop on the status of those vehicles. On another note, well, any questions on that?
Nope. I actually got it electronically and checked it out, it's pretty cool.
Yeah, I forwarded it to you so you could take a look. It's just a simple program. Ryan Quimby from IT helped me set it up. Like you said, it's just a button you push on the spreadsheet, taking it offline, online, and actually, to take it one step further, on that Google Sheets, the next page on that sheet is our maintenance calendar. So John can look ahead, other people can look ahead on when those inspections or vehicle PMs are taking place, so they know what's coming up in the months to come.
Just, do we have operator checklists? Like
Yes.
daily or weekly? They do a walk around on the trucks and
Yes,
Daily.
daily.
daily? So
Daily
if the
on all
brakes are
these-
making noises, if the wipers aren't working,
Yep.
they're responsible to report that day, right?
Yep, and that's working
Awesome.
great, and obviously, the garage foreman takes those. Usually they get turned in once a week, unless it's a safety concern, we take that vehicle offline, take the keys, blah, blah, blah. But then the garage foreman kind of takes those vehicle maintenance sheets and then converts those into work orders.
Are they on computer? The garage guys, the maintenance
Yes,
guys?
the, Mark Langoni puts in a lot of work orders, but the mechanics have also been trained on how to put in work orders and do
And
that.
the checklists are a piece of paper?
It's kind of twofold. I have a preventative maintenance system set up through the work order system, and then I also have kind of each vehicle, I formulated a checklist on what that inspection entails. Like for the equipment, based on the amount of hours there is, what needs to be done
Right,
based
so when the
on.
operator does their daily checklist, that's
Oh.
on a piece of paper?
Yes,
And that's
yes.
in a file drawer or something, as a
That's
piece of
actually,
paper?
that's actually on our on our computers.
Scanning
and-
it, are you scanning them, or?
No, Mark has those up in a file, just right now as far as the months. But that's another thing we have to kind of work out on how, so we're not accumulating all that
Right, so
paper.
a recommendation would be to either take a picture of it or scan it,
Okay,
and then file it by vehicle. And
Yeah.
it'll be in date sequence order, and it'll be a real good way to, if you gotta
Right.
see, hey, all of a sudden, this was reported, wasn't reported for 2 weeks before, but somebody
Right.
says it was like that for a month.
right,
You can kind of go back
Right.
and see, was it ever reported? And
Right.
just, instead of the papers being all over the
Right.
place.
and I've kind of talked to the guys, we're still kind of working through.
Yep. It's just a suggestion. I'm not saying do it tomorrow. I'm
Through
just
the
saying.
process and not writing something up day after day after day. You write it up one week, hopefully that work order will be processed, and depending on what we're doing and how we can fit that in and prioritizing those items, so,
Awesome.
yeah. So
Good
we're working
stuff.
forward. Next item I have for the board is the high school tennis courts. We ordered the lights about 2 weeks ago. They will be arriving on the week of April 13th for installation. I'm actually working with a couple different contracts, try to get a crane, be based on the size of the poles, the weight of the poles. My previous contractor cannot help me, so I'm working through that for the next couple days, see if we can obviously get this scheduled and the fixtures put up. So my plan is April 13th, come in, assemble the poles on the ground next to those footings in place now, get the poles installed. Subsequently, the following week, get all the wires pulled and everything else and fire them up. And hopefully by April 24th, and that dedication ceremony is scheduled for May 16th still, and I believe I previously told the board on that dedication date. And obviously, going along with that, weather, thaw, it's, so, I've talked to Sam Pezzanelli from the Tennis Association and told him my plans, hopefully it holds true. And that's all I have for you.
Okay. Let's see, anything from Dan?
I think I've pretty much touched on all of Dan's. Dan's actually off on AutoCAD training for the next couple of days with the latest version of AutoCAD that we had just acquired. Actually, one technology item I was going to mention that John's guys are getting very comfortable with, and you feel free to jump in at all, is I think I've shown at least yourself, John, the online application we have now where we have access to all the town's water, sewer, fiber optic, storm records, both in map form and then links to each one of the record drawings and the tie cards and things like that that's available. So what we've done now is we now have standby foreman has an iPad that rotates from standby foreman to standby foreman that's set up with that application, so at any point they need to get out and do markouts, they have all that information right with them. The interesting thing is that the GPS function built into the iPad allows them to locate features, particularly this wintertime. We might have, and again, you might have a manhole that's under 3 feet of snow and you have no idea where it is within 50 feet or 100 feet. You can stand there and walk with the device and have the dot that records the location of the device track where you're going, so you can tell if you're getting closer or further away from the manhole.
Warm or hot, huh?
And get right on top of, within a couple of feet, right on top of the structure. So it's been very helpful.
And we have actually used it to that extent this winter,
Yeah.
where we would have been lost out there.
And the guys are finding it's useful enough that they're loading the application. We've set up a single login that anybody in the DPW can log into this application, and they're putting it on their individual phones because they're seeing a value to it. We were trying to find catch basins under snowbanks to make certain the streets aren't flooding. You know, they're out there being able to find things that are out there.
Cool.
So it's,
Awesome.
Yeah, especially at night. You know, it's always an emergency.
the next step that we're going with that is we're going to test it with Mr. Esposito, because Roy generally is the guy that's most comfortable with technology of providing some sketching capability in the field as well. So for instance, you know, using information we had, we might have thought that a certain pipe was a certain size. Well, until we actually dig up the pipe and see it, we find out maybe it's a different size. So he can make that data entry right there in the field, and then he can actually he'll be able to do some sketching in the field as well,
For
so that
size or
information
whatever.
gets out, yeah. So one step at a time, but
Yeah,
we're
it's awesome.
moving there.
Sounds real good. So any other business?
I think I'm good.
Appropriation articles were squared, did we talk about those?
Good point. Appropriations articles, let's see, we had 2 articles submitted. The Chapter 90 funding, which is pretty straightforward. We did submit an article for funding of the town hall renovations, not knowing where Appropriations Committee and where Capital Committee was going to finish with their recommendations. I did learn from speaking with Jim Broderick today that Appropriations met last night, and they're still trying to sort through ultimately what is going to be recommended and what funding is available this year in terms of what level of money can the town afford to invest in capital improvements, and so where basically they set the bar on the list. He indicated that there may be a follow-up meeting early next week, Monday or Tuesday of next week, to try to sort through priorities, and suggested that we may end up wanting to attend that meeting. I think it would be helpful to add a little bit more clarity to the town hall renovation plan, and the fact that it's a multi-year plan, but we're only looking for a portion of the funding in the first year, and have everybody have a better understanding of what we expect to accomplish on a year-by-year basis, and where we look to be able to save the money by doing it with town forces.
I mean, it's so similar to how we did the senior center, and the proof is in that, just go there and look. So it took us a few years, but we did it at significantly less dollars and saved a structure that some people probably would have thrown the towel in and said, it's gonna cost us too many millions to tear it down and make it additional parking for the ball fields. Instead, it's a very, very useful, attractive, functional building. So I think that's the message everybody needs to know, is that's exactly what we're gonna do with the town hall. Ryan has 6 people less in there. Technology, you can say, unfortunately, is replacing people, or the need for additional people. So the structure has the capacity for us for a while. We just need to get it up to snuff with code, electrical, sprinkler,
Bathrooms.
ADA bathrooms, and give it a little facelift while we're doing it. And we're gonna be just so far better off as a town, putting it into that town seal iconic building. I mean, I haven't found anybody yet who's gonna tell me we're gonna tear down the town hall, which is on our town seal in the center
It
of
was
our
a pretty
town.
building, wasn't it?
That was a nice town hall you used to have. Here, let me show you the pictures. I just haven't heard anybody say that's real.
It ain't going away.
Yeah.
No.
We own it.
All right.
All right, we've already scheduled the next meeting for
Monday, April 6th.
Monday, April 6th at 5 o'clock.
So do I hear something?
No, 5.
Motion to adjourn?
Well, I thought it was
Second?
6.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Are we convening to go into something else?
Yes, we are.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
So we,
Right? We don't need to record that.
We're going to
Oh, it's on.
convene to go into executive session for strategy with respect to collective bargaining and strategy in respect to non-union negotiations.
So moved.
Dan Burek, John Mayberry.
Tom
Aye.
Wilson. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.